The crypto announcements on budget day sent shockwaves across the crypto community, but it was a mixed bag of responses. Some believed such an announcement legitimized the crypto space in India, while others were worried about its implementation. But what does this tax really mean for India's young crypto investors? Will the CBDC increase financial inclusion in the country? Our tech editor Aayush Ailawadi discusses the future of crypto in India with a stellar panel of experts.
My name is Aayush Ailawadi, and we're discussing the future of cryptocurrencies. With me today is a stellar panel of guests. We have L. Badri Narayanan. He's the executive partner at Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan, a tax and tech lawyer. And of course, we have Sanjay Farke, author of FinTech Future. Tanvi Ratna, CEO of Policy 4.0, is also joining us. And Kunal Nandbani, CEO and co-founder of Utrade Solutions, and an author of a fantastic book on the blockchain as well. Guys, thanks so much for joining us today on this BT brainstorm session. And I wanted to start off by asking you, Badri, essentially when we look at whatever's happened over the past couple of weeks in the world of cryptocurrencies, we've had some time to digest and analyze the crypto tax announcement made by the finance minister in her budget speech. But there's still a few questions when it comes to implementation. How do you see it playing out in the coming months from a tax and law perspective?
Aisha, as there's been this announcement in the budget on the crypto tax, and we've had some time to kind of digest what is going on that. I think at a very simplistic level, I think what the government proposes to do is like you said, they want executed. But I think at the ground level, they're going to face challenges. So take, for example, they're expecting TDS to be deducted on transactions which are going to happen between a buyer and a seller. And many times these transactions are happening through exchanges and other medium where it is not possible to know who's the buyer and who's the seller on either side, right? So some of these things were problematic issues in, DMAT and other places which are solved through, having, different form of taxation, something like a, securities transaction tax rather than kind of taxing this on an exchange basis. It's going to be very hard for some of these things to get completed. They're also saying that if you are going to do a barter, that is one crypto for another crypto, okay, the buyer has to ensure the seller is going to pay the tax. It's going to be very, very difficult to make that, in a process to be able to do. So what are you going to do? You're going to ask the other person to pay the tax and give you a tax challan. I mean, there are some fundamental issues with some of these points. And then of course, we have the issue with respect to what's the true scope of the provision itself. So we still have issues with respect to determining what's the set off of laws, what's the cost of acquisition, how are you going to compute this tax, what happens if, for example, there are exchanges, what happens if you're a gift, how do you make, for example, a Bitcoin could have multiple values in different exchanges, okay, or on different platforms. So how do you take a value of a Bitcoin? So a lot of challenges I feel on the implementation side, and we are not even scratching the surface. These are all situations where we feel that there'll be an implementation challenge. There's a whole host of enforcement issues when you're going to do peer-to-peer, global crypto exchanges, and so on and so forth. I think still a long way to go for this tax actually to be brought to tax and then implemented and then actually seeing the light of the day and being effective, according to me.
Interesting. Tanvi, the fact that a crypto tax has been announced has made a lot of crypto enthusiasts believe that all is well for crypto in India. But as we all know, taxation doesn't necessarily mean something is legalized in India. Do you reckon the regulations should have come before such an announcement?
Yeah, definitely, Aayush. And I think this was my thesis the minute this tax announcement came out, that it is just a deterrent. It has been put out with that intent because there was a period of very high volatility. And, I can just speak from the policymaker perspective. And I think there were many months of just very unfettered activity, right? And I think that gave that raised a lot of concerns, I think, across the government. And I think everyone is aware of those headlines, that had come the last few months. And I think the regulation, I think we've already seen it now 4+ years in the making, and it's a very difficult one to come to consensus on, I think, within the government. So this was really seen as a deterrent move, and I fully agree with Badri that it is actually not necessarily going to lead to the outcomes that they were expecting, because those who are in the know, they know that on the day of the announcement, a lot of volume from Indian exchanges already moved to overseas ones, right? And now it's going to be quite the task for the government to try and get TDS data collected for any such transactions that happen there. And I think and this is something that our board also highlighted, and there were some high level meetings with the Prime Minister also. Unless we are accepting the decentralized nature of this industry, there's nothing meaningful we're going to be doing on the policy front.
So interesting, Tanvi, you say that. In fact, we had a panel on one of our shows, Tech Today, and this is exactly what we spoke about, that so much of that money is moved abroad, and something that Badri alluded to earlier as well, in terms of peer-to-peer payment platforms as well. How will the government really look at all of this and bring this under the tax net? But Sanjay, I'd like to get you in on this. Now, India's digital payments push is second to none. What the NPCI has done with UPI over the years, and of course, Aadhaar, GST, and so much talk of India Stack. That's something you understand well. The finance minister speaks of a CBDC, a central bank digital currency. Do you think this would further augment the digital payment scene in India? Would it actually help with financial inclusion, or are these just things better put on paper?
No, So thanks, first of all, Aayush, for inviting. I think you started talking about cryptocurrency. So I want to first set it right, sure, that, it is not right to call it currency, because currency is, first of all, a preserve of the government, something that is issued, a liability of the government. And none of the crypto assets or digital assets, which would be the right way to look at it, are actually, in some sense, liabilities or are blessed by the government in that sense. Now, coming to the CBDC part, right? CBDC is one connotation, and so is crypto assets, stroke digital assets, and ultimately at the base of it is this new technology called blockchain, right? And in some sense, it is being called as the Web 3.0 or the internet, next version of the internet, electricity, internet, and third blockchain, and in that sense, right? So we are still at an early stage of an evolution of what is, digitalization of our life, right? In all respects. And when we talk about money going digital, we already seen payments going digital, but large parts of financial systems still are not, in some sense, fully digital, right? In some sense, the payment is the first sort of port of call. We've had a fantastic Jan Dhan account, which took, I think, 70 to 80% of the country became suddenly in 3-4 years, became, from no account, financial account, bank account, to having an account. From there, we went to having potentially access to every phone, every wallet, a payment which is interoperable, which is like a dream for most of the rest of the world, actually. And I talk to people outside India, including LATAM and other emerging markets. They obviously think it's something which is really truly outstanding and out of the world. And even compared to the developed markets, actually, right? And US is talking about a Fed coin, which will come in probably 2022 and 2023 and so on. And it will do interoperable payments, which we already have as of 2 years back, in some sense. So we are far ahead, I think, in some sense of the rest. We also have our own unique problems. One of the unique problems is how do we sort out the contractual issues. We have too many disputes. The framework, the legal framework takes time. So can we sort that out? Can we include people who have, maybe just a bank account, but not access to insurance, other financial services, so as to call it true financial inclusion? Can all these use cases be covered by, appropriate use of these new technologies, whether it is CBDC, whether it is distributed ledger, which lies at the base of it? I think these are the things that we should really focus on. What are the use cases? What can we achieve? How can we make lives better, rather than just the buzzwords of the technology or speculation?
Interesting. Sanjay mentioned that. Kunal, with all this talk about a CBDC, and of course, the Honorable Finance Minister was on a Business Today earlier in this week and spoke about it as well. But the end user experience for the Aam Aadmi, when they're already so adept and so comfortable using Paytm and Google Pay, and of course, even for international transactions, we have options out there as well. So how does the end user experience change with the introduction of a CBDC, according to you, Kunal?
In a nutshell, it does not. There is for the just trying to be inclusive here, in my mind, there is zero value in a CBDC coming from a government. Let's remember that the cryptocurrency, if I can use that word still, was developed to walk away from the government, to go into a decentralized fashion where the governments would not, could not, should not control. But frankly, the decentralization has been as highly centralized as it gets. All the crypto exchanges, crypto companies have the central CEOs. They are regulated by the same government. They were invented to get away from. The same governments are taxing it. So it actually brings zero value in grand scheme of things. CBDC, if it is being developed to digitize anything in terms of money and payments, good motive, but we can do equally without a CBDC as well. And we've been doing, especially in India, UPI has been super successful. You talked about NPCI and all, so that's already fairly digital. Rest of the cash in the system would stay for a long time because of the limitation of some older people to adopt these digital means of using Paytm and Google Pays and other things. But coming back to CBDC, if they are trying to digitize, India is as digital as it gets in the world in terms of payments and money. If it is to replace Bitcoin and show people that we have a government-backed digital coin, it's an oxymoron. It makes no sense, because if it's a government-backed, it doesn't matter. Whether it's an NPCI coin versus a RBI coin, it's the same thing. It's the same digital thing, right? And nobody's gonna give up Bitcoin and accept a digital INR coming from the government at all. I don't think, or even if they accept, it's just like anything else. So it's adding no real value. And I still do not know what the intent is. If nobody's actually asking the deeper questions, everyone is just saying, yeah, we'll bring our own crypto or digital. And there is no blockchain, by the way, for all the viewers. There is no blockchain in this. Blockchain, if it is just centralized by the same central bank, and they are only ones validating, then do you expect RBI would ever allow any independent miners to come and validate all transactions and let the majority decide what's right? That's what a real blockchain is, right? If the government is only going to validate it, it is just another database. There is no blockchain. There is no decentralization. It's almost like saying the North Korean leader one day says that we'll be democratic from tomorrow. I'll be the only one voting.
Interesting analogies there, Tanvi. Since even Sanjay and Kunal were saying we should be asking the deeper questions. So it's not just about regulating cryptocurrencies and the exchanges. There's so much happening in the crypto world: DeFi, NFTs, the metaverse. That's something I personally like to cover a lot on my shows. Do you think policymakers need to cast a wider net when it comes to regulating not just crypto, but figuring out how to be future ready for Web3? Are we missing the wood for the trees?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. That's where a lot of our efforts are focused. At the moment, we are doing some things that we will announce fairly soon around Web3 and India. But I think this is a sort of hangover question, the whole token classification, which till now is not in place. Like, this is a very worrying place to be when you're even thinking about Web3. I mean, we are simply not ready for that kind of a reality. And I do think I don't think that doing something on crypto misses the woods for the trees. It's actually we are doing too little, too late, I feel, regulatorily. And I empathize a lot with Kunal's views. I work day in and day out with startups, and I just think it's not the government's mandate to protect decentralization, and I think the community needs to get that very straight. They don't have any responsibility to make sure that your mission and your idea of a world goes ahead, right? That's really on the community, and I think it's high time that the industry also organizes itself better. I think with every emerging tech, it's the onus is it's really been the government that got it right from the get-go, right? It was usually always efforts by the entrepreneurs, by the investors, by the people who took up efforts in educating policymakers, who took up efforts in finding middle ground with them. And that's how policy comes about. It's a process, right? And I think the community unfortunately has been very checked out in this whole thing, like that there have been exchanges that do meetings and stuff, and that's why you see most policies is veering towards more of exchange based sort of regulation, right? But I mean, if you don't take responsibility, you don't get the results either, right? So I think this is the reality of a democracy, right? And I think it's high time that, people realize this, and on all sides, right? Like it's not all on the government, is what I would say.
Interesting. Badri, you worked with the regulator before, and from your conversations with the regulator and people in positions who are taking the calls over here, the influential ones, how much do you think the concepts like this are being researched on? Some of the things we spoke about. Obviously, when India Stack, and that's something Sanjay knows a lot about, when that was coming about, there were a lot of consultations as well, even when it came to the NPCI coming up with UPI, and that's a fantastic payments grid. But when it comes to cryptocurrencies, there's so much cryptic information out there, which even all of us, honestly, are so curious about and learning new things every day. Do you think that the right conversations are being had, especially from the ones making the decisions?
So it's a very good, important question that you asked, Ayush. The problem is that, like you said, we tend to miss the trees for the woods. Okay. And the most important thing is to kind of look at this holistically. It's not just crypto, it's not just this thing, but Web 3.0 and how the world is going to move forward. Mm-hmm. So without having a clear view on what you're regulating, if you're just going to pick something and you're going to try and decide from a tax point of view to start with to regulate it, it's not going to be that effective. Okay. And I think Government of India needs to take a decision where it wants to stand. It wants to be the fintech capital of the world. Like if you take UK, for example, they've decided that we want to be the fintech capital of the world. We're not going to regulate crypto except in situations where retail investors are going to get affected in a very minimal way, and allowing decentralized and crypto startups and companies to come through. While Europe has taken another view, saying that we want to understand what this is and regulating it. But tax is not the starting point for some of these things. But I think Government of India needs to do that. So what happens that our regulators, we tend to talk to the same people. We tend to have our trusted groups. We tend to think of it in a way where we have a comfort with respect to how these things operate. So sometimes the conversations that are happening within the government may not be reflective of what we should be doing in this space. So I think a wider audience, more cumulative conversation around these things will be more effective, according to me.
Interesting. Sanjay, I saw you nodding in affirmation. I want to get your take on, you mentioned the whole bit on financial inclusion, but when we talk about cryptocurrencies and a CBDC, let's look at the budget announcements. Would you say that there is a natural fit when it comes to India Stack? How exactly do this world, how does it fit into India Stack?
Yeah, I think, India Stack is just a set of tools which help, everything from universal access to payments to universal access to eventually healthcare, education, and everything else, right? As we talked about everything becoming digital, you need common rails. And unlike, let's say, US or maybe China, where the rails could be owned by private entities, which could become way too large and then monopolistic, we have a version in India, which is those rails become accessible to everybody. A large company, a startup, and anybody who wishes to build on it can build on it. So I think it is all in logical extension of each other. How they exactly connect is something that I think the time will tell. But fundamentally, I think we are in a very unique and interesting times where we are talking about. We are talking about democracy. We are talking about centralization versus decentralization. We are talking about, who takes the decisions on a variety of things. How can code do many more things than, people in some sense? And how can we automate things, right? In some sense, that is really the core argument in a way. And it's going to become bigger and bigger because, what COVID has done in the last 2 years is that all of what we were used to assume as physical or analog life has become digital. This call that we are having is digital. Most of our payments are digital. Netflix, Facebook, Amazon, everything that we use on our phone is digital. So, it's really just going to explode. We are still at the early stage 5G is going to come, IoT is going to come. The cars are going to get at some stage driverless, but before that, maybe hundreds of sensors. There is a chip shortage everywhere. Why is that? Because everything requires chips, right? So what does it all tell you? Basically, it tells you that we are going to have more and more digital lifestyle. We need to find ways in which, we still make sense of the world as we understood earlier, which has changed quite drastically. And everything related to the old world, right? Like going to a bank to, give a check and get cash has just like that, it has disappeared. We use a credit card or now a payment wallet and so on, a QR code. It's going to just keep on changing, and that's just the way it is. And I think the right solutions will come. I agree with the other participants that there has to be more inclusive dialogue, because some of these themes are very, very deep themes, and they require deep understanding, research, to be able to design the kind of society that we want. And I think India probably is the best, in one of the best places to actually do it. We've kind of led in knowledge generation way past, and we have another opportunity now to once again lead the world.
Sanjay, what's best is I like that you practice what you preach, because obviously you are in the mobile, get set, go, work from anywhere life as we speak and do this session. And that's how important this space is to you. But Kunal, I want to bring you in on this. What are your thoughts on some things that Sanjay, Badri, and Tanvi just said? Does the government really need to zoom out and look at a bigger picture, Web 3.0 sort of regulation? Is that the correct way forward?
I personally think Web 3.0 is more of a fad than any reality underneath again. There is no true decentralization. If anything, it's just Web 2.01. It's just another incremental version of Web 2.01, where some entrepreneurs, VCs are getting together and trying to rebuild the internet, hoping that they will back and find the next Amazons, Facebooks of the world that would give them exponential returns. Think about it. Let's take a step back. So Web 1 was just content coming from companies. Web 2 was content coming from anyone and everyone. You could contribute, I could contribute. We are all microbloggers. We all have some social media accounts, etc. Now in Web 3, they are saying you will own your data. You will get paid for your data, right? So you can contribute and earn at the same time. So for you posting something on Facebook or Instagram, not just Facebook and Insta becomes richer by the data they sell to advertisers, something would flow back to you. That's a rethink of a model. That's the expectation of Web 3. But in reality, Web 3 is also not going to be as decentralized as we all would want, or as Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who imagined internet, would have wanted or has imagined, which is that the decentralization now, you will, just like Walmart replaced by Amazon in the internet. Now, Amazon might be, in the best case scenario, in the next 5-10 years, be replaced by another protocol that's again backed by a VC, public-owned firm, some other CEO in the middle again, right? Could Ethereum, Vitalik, could be somebody else, who knows? So Web 3, I think, is more of a, I really think it's a fad. It's just a hype. And if I just take a few years back, 2017 was all about ICOs. 2018 was all about STO, securitized token offerings. 2019 was all about DeFi. 2020 was all about NFTs. 21 was now Metaverse. 22 is about Web 3.0. Every year there's a new fad and they forget the old one. And in reality, ICOs didn't deliver any value. DeFi has never happened. STOs never took off. Some of those things come here, and now JPEGs are being sold in NFT world, in the metaverse, that may come in 5 to 10 years. Sure, we would be very likely living a digital virtual world. As Sanjay was saying, that's fair, but in that world also, the protocols are not fundamentally going to change, in my view. You would still have ample centralization. There is no need for reinventing the internet. There's no need to rebuild the internet. Of course, we may open it up more, truly make it borderless, but that comes down to the governments. Governments still try to control it. Think about fake news, think about social media, etc. So in my view, government can choose to learn about it. It would really help if they regulate these things timely. Whether they get it right or wrong, that's secondary, but timely regulation on crypto would have been great. Last 4 years, we've been waiting. Every month, every quarter, there is a statement, something would happen, nothing happens. Social media never got regulated. Probably India is the only one where they've asked them to bring data to India and keep it there and then delete the stuff government doesn't like, right or wrong, but there is some regulation there. And unlike US, where everybody has become just addictive to endless scroll feeds of Instas and stuff. Some learning about it, regulation might help, but I think for that, government has to learn first. And actually, the toughest thing is going to be finding the value among the whole valuation hype cycles and the capitalistic cycles that are going on alongside, because it's very hard for government already to understand the new technologies, and now to take out the hype from the real value, that's even tougher. That's where they're struggling probably. And due to lack of any precedence in the world, there is no regulation coming. Very clear. Government doesn't want to innovate again. They don't want to innovate in terms of policy making. They're waiting for someone to come up, but nothing is happening. So yeah, taking a step back, learning about it should help.
Okay, interesting. A lot said by Kunal there. Badri, the tech geek, inside you and I, our heart broke a little when he said Web3 is not the future. But some of the things that are very fascinating about this are, and especially what the crypto and blockchain world has really ushered in, concepts like smart contracts and NFTs, which as a lawyer in a previous life, I seem to really want to unlearn everything I have about IPR after I read up on NFTs. So would you say that this crypto revolution could be a game changer for law and business?
I think it's the best time to practice law in the digital world, because I think it's completely changed. So one of the interesting aspects, of course, is the borderless aspect of digital, and I know the whole problem of how do you allocate. But more than that, there are fascinating issues which are coming up in crypto, which are beyond our imagination, which just goes beyond what we have ever been able to imagine from a law. I'll give you an example. For example, say there are exchanges, right? And you kind of buy and sell cryptocurrencies. But in reality, you only purchase a very small fraction of a cryptocurrency, which is owned in custody by these exchanges for a large number of people. So we have this concept in Sale of Goods Act, which basically talks about how is a property in a bulk transferred when a sale happens, and so on and so forth. All these concepts have to be relooked at from a lawyer's perspective, because it completely changes. You have a digital asset owned by multiple number of people, but who are able to buy and sell between each other, but don't really have any ownership or title or possession. They just have a token and almost a certificate of ownership. Okay, so that changes so many things. Then you have these NFTs, which are fascinating things, which are able to kind of, there is a mixture of IP, data, and technology coming together. Some fascinating things. What do you really get in terms of rights? How is it operating? And then you add this new layers of legal technology, which is coming on top of that, or legal tech, which is like things like smart contracts, where, for example, an NFT, somebody creates a JPEG, like he said, or an artwork, and then the NFT has got a smart contract inbuilt in it, which basically says that every time this gets sold, the initial author will get some money out of it, and it's able to then operate in the legal fraternity, just like you said, if then else kind of statements being put in on top of that. So they're going away also from, like, it's fascinating from a legal concepts perspective. It's fascinating from the confluence of different laws that need to come in, and it's fascinating because it's truly going digital, where human intervention is being taken out, it's being decentralized. And it's kind of a path. I mean, I may disagree with Kunal saying that Web 3.0 is not there. I mean, the thing is, the internet is such a fascinating thing. It doesn't matter what you or I think. It ultimately what the herd thinks, right? And what the herd wants to move towards. And the herd, I think, is not you and me, but a younger generation, which has been digital first from day one. Okay. And therefore, I think they kind of usher in all of these things. So there are people who would like to spend more of the time in the virtual world than the real world, and where they want to do transactions are completely digital, where there's human intervention is minimal. And I think that's going to be the world many years from now. And I think though Web 3.0 in its current form may not get there, but the internet is going to fundamentally change. And crypto, NFTs, smart contracts, the way we look at intellectual property, all of that has to undergo a change if you are to keep up with what's going to happen over the next 10 years. That's my view.
And Badri, if we have to keep up with what's going to happen, we'll have to tune into sessions like these as well, because the future of crypto is just one title for the session, but largely it's the future and the confluence of tech, law, policy, business. It all comes together. And let's hope the next time we do this, Tanvi, Sanjay, Kunal, and Badri, we can do this perhaps in the metaverse. Thanks so much for joining us on this BT Brainstorm session and sharing all these fascinating insights. Thanks so much for joining. And for everyone, thank you for watching. Goodbye for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.